So tonight I have author George Jared, and we want to sit down with our viewers and we want to talk about the Rebekah Gould case. George and I both have worked so hard on this case, and we're ready to pick that back up again. Recently, with the attention that this case has gotten, Dr. Larry Gould was recently on Dr. Oz with Kat Townsend, and she's also released a podcast, Hell and Gone. And the case has gotten a lot of public attention. So George and I have also been flooded with lots of questions and concerns by readers and viewers and people who are close to this case. So we want to sit down with you guys and we want to just answer some of those questions. We want to release some info to you guys that you haven't seen yet. So George has written 2 books, Witches in West Memphis and Creekside Bones, both which he discusses the Rebekah Gould case. I've written countless articles on this, and like I said, we just want to pick it back up again and see if we can get this thing solved. So this is the timeline that we have on Rebekah. On the morning of September 20th, 2004, she dropped Casey off at the Melbourne Sonic around 8 a.m., went to Possum Trot, got a breakfast biscuit where she was seen on camera. She then returned back to Casey McCullough's house, where we believe shortly after she arrived back to his residence, she was brutally murdered. Around noon that day, she was supposed to meet her sister Danielle to travel back to Fayetteville, and Rebekah never showed. So after hours of not hearing from their sister, they grew concerned. They reported her missing. We believe the following day, then patrolman Charlie Melton and Casey McCullough returned back to Casey's house, and Rebekah was nowhere to be found. A couple things were missing, apart from Rebekah: her large black suitcase and a piano leg, and we'll fill in those details later about the piano leg. The crime scene, the mattress, the bloody mattress was flipped. It looked like someone had tried to clean up after themselves. The bloody sheets were still in the washing machine. Rebekah's purse and car were still there. Her dog was there. 3 days later, after Rebekah was reported missing, that Wednesday, so I guess it was...
Yeah.
Okay, so that Wednesday... Rebekah was reported missing to the media. On September 27th, her body was found about 5 miles outside of Melbourne.
And I was actually out there when it was found.
George was out there when the body was found. To this day, no one has been arrested for the murder of Rebekah Gould, and that just troubles us. And we want to know who murdered Rebekah and why. And those are some of the questions that we have, and we want to kind of get into that with you guys tonight. So let's talk about that piano leg.
Okay, let's start with that. And also, I'd like to say right now that we have got all the autopsy reports and independent analysis of the autopsy that was done by Dr. Larry Gould. We've also got Rebekah's death certificate here. And we've also got a lot of reporting and a lot of information that we've collected through the years. And I've always been kind of hesitant to release every single detail that I knew about this case because, I didn't want to violate the integrity of the investigation. And I'm not going to do that tonight either. But there are some things in this case that are actually pretty troubling now, and we need to get into it. So let's start off with talking about our killer. Now, at this point, there's no suspect ever been named in this case, only one person of interest. Now, the police say they have a bunch of suspects, okay? Now, what we need to do is we need to figure out a way to boil down to who our killer is. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll say that every single person who's listening to this is a suspect in this case right now because no one's been arrested, right? So let's boil that down. Let's narrow the margin. So the first thing we do is the piano leg. Inside Casey McCullough's house, there was a loose piano leg on a piano. We don't know how many people knew about the piano leg, but whoever that number is, it's almost certain that the person who killed Rebekah, when they went into that house that morning, knew about the piano leg. One thing about murderers is they always bring their weapon or they know where there is a weapon. No one's going to go out to a remote house out in Guyan, Arkansas without knowledge of a weapon. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this was a rageful attack. In her own autopsy report, it states that she almost certainly and likely died from a singular blow to the head. And it was on the left side of her head, and it was a horizontal fracture, which means she was likely laying in the bed on her right side when the blow was delivered. And it was delivered with enough force that it killed her within minutes. And that's according to her official autopsy report and the independent analysis that Dr. Gould had of his daughter's death. So, and there are absolutely no other wounds to her body. There are no other bone bruises. The radiology report that the state medical examiner's office put together said absolutely there were no other injuries to her body that they could find. And that's key, because here's the thing. If she tried to fight or attack her off, she would have bruises to her hands. She would have defensive wounds. If she was positioned any other way, if she was sitting up, if she was standing, the blow would have been into a different part of her body. The killer walked in after they grabbed that piano leg and crushed her skull with enough force to only have to use one blow. That's a rage-fueled attack. So,
And because she didn't fight back, led us to believe that she was possibly sleeping.
right, there was absolutely no effect. So the second thing we've got here is now we have a rage-filled attack.
Definitely don't think a stranger would come
No,
in a rage.
Not at all. Not at all. And so we've limited our pool of suspects to people who fit this criteria. Now let's eliminate some other possibilities real quick. And we're going to use the forensic science in these reports. Okay. Number 3. One of the motives that has been listed is a sexual assault. Okay. In her official autopsy report, it states, and I quote, "There was no evidence of a sexual assault. However, the decomposition process was so far along, it was almost impossible to tell." So, since we don't have direct evidence, we're going to have to use maybe what we would refer to as indirect evidence. Number 1, and if there are any family members watching this right now, I'm going to pause for 5 seconds because I am going to talk about a couple of things that could be very disturbing, and I don't want to do that. Okay, when her body was found, she was wearing a t-shirt and a pair of panties. Black briefs is exactly what it states in her autopsy report. Okay, if she had been raped, it is highly unlikely that the rapist would have put her panties back on her. That just wouldn't have happened. Okay, then we've got second, and then part of that other indirect evidence is the injuries to her body. If she was being raped,
She would have been fighting back.
she would have fought back.
Right. Absolutely.
So there would be definite evidence of those types of injuries. And it also says in there too, it says clearly that if she had fought back in any way, there would be evidence of it, and there is no evidence of it. That is in the autopsy report. Okay, so we've got her underwear is getting put back on. She has no injuries, and then there's a third detail, and I looked at this specifically in the autopsy report. I looked to see if there was any damage to her breasts. Because if a rapist came into her house and raped her, that was part of the motivation, then you would expect to see damage to her sex organs, and the breasts were totally normal. It says in the autopsy report there was no injuries to them, they were perfectly normal, and there's a reason why they would note that in there, because they know
They're ruling that out.
Right, that's a part of the process. So we can say there is a low probability,
Right.
very low, that this was the result of a sexual assault. And plus, she was still wearing her shirt, so all of her clothes were on. And by the way, her sister Danielle told me that it was her habit when she slept to sleep like this. So that further makes us speculate with good reason that she was asleep when this happened. Now, the second, another thing that the killer did, the killer flips the mattress,
Yes.
puts the bloody sheets in the washer, and cleans up the mess.
That's what I wanted to get into. I wanted to ask you, why would a killer, if it was someone who didn't know Rebekah, why would someone take the time to put the sheets in the washing machine, to flip the mattress, to try and clean up? Why would they take the time to do that?
That's a great question, and we don't know the answer to that. Because here's the thing, most murder cases I've covered, they murder the person, they get
out of there.
They get out of Dodge, they're gone. The only reason, there has to be
a motive to why they would clean up.
Everything that happens for a reason. And Dr. Gould had, at one time, hired a private investigator to work on this case, and he gave me a report, and I was reading through it the other day, and he actually talked to some people who were in the house right after the blood and all that was discovered. And I was told at the time there was a willful intent to clean up the bloody mess. This private investigator, who I didn't know at the time and didn't even live here at the time, he was actually had a conversation with someone who worked for the Office of Emergency Management in Israel County, who was in the house. And the person told him specifically, he said, there was blood on the walls and somebody tried to wipe the walls down. So that is a detail that you can't ignore. There was an attempted cleanup, okay? And so now we're getting down here to...
And also her possessions were still there, apart from
Everything.
the suitcase. Her wallet, her car, her keys. I mean, wouldn't you think
Right.
that, hey, I'm going to grab this too?
Right. You would think some of that stuff... because
If that was a motive, yeah.
Here's the problem. Okay, so they haphazardly attempt to clean up the house. Okay, her car and her keys and all of her stuff being there, including her folded clothes, will lead the police to believe or know that she was very tragically attacked in the house, and they're going to be looking for her. So you're not really concealing anything. Okay, now here's another detail that I think is very important. Rebekah's body was removed.
Yes.
And why is that important? Because putting a body in a car is a major, major thing. It enhances your chances significantly of getting caught.
Yes.
It enhances your chances of evidence being left in your car. People could see you dumping the body. They could see you driving around.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of bad things that connotate with taking the body out of the house. So
We think they even risked driving past the police station with that body in order to get to her drop zone.
it's possible, but there's also a trail. There's also trails and other. It's possible they went by the sheriff's department, but it is possible they went another route.
Right.
I'll leave open that possibility. So removing the body, and here's the thing. I think, and Danielle told me her suitcase was missing. Her sister. I think that her body was placed in the suitcase.
Right.
And the car was backed to the back porch, and the body was put into the car, and then the killer took off. So now, there was an interesting statement in Catherine Townsend's podcast series, Helen Gone. One of Casey's friends, Patrick, he obviously defending his friend, as any friend would do. He said during that podcast, he said, absolutely, my friend didn't do it, or have anything to do with it,
Right.
excuse me. But he did make one interesting comment, and I thought it was just interesting to me. He said the one thing that kind of bothered him a little bit was that the person knew where like cleaning supplies were in the house, and how to use a washing machine, and that the person seemed to feel comfortable in the house. So that kind of stood out to me, and I hadn't really thought about that before. And the last thing that really has just really piqued my interest here lately is Rebekah's dog.
Right.
She had a dog named, they called her Lady, but originally Danielle told me she was named Foxy Lady.
Yeah.
Okay. The dog was found alive in the house uninjured. And why this is important to me is because
that dog had to have been familiar.
Right. The dog had to be familiar with the person who was entering the house, because I don't know if you have a dog. I have a dog. When I come into my house, my dog's happy. When a stranger comes in my house, my dog goes crazy. When my friends come over, my dog is calm. When my family relatively calm, you know what I mean?
Right.
So,
well, and here's the deal. If that dog if an intruder comes in the house, that dog, like you said, is going to be making a lot of noise, which would have woken Rebekah up.
Right.
And Rebekah is a scrapper. We knew that she was a scrapper. She's not going to lay down and take it, that
Right.
she would have fought for her life, and there's no indication that she did that in the autopsy report. So that dog, you were right, had to have been familiar with the intruder.
Right.
Because we believe Rebekah was still asleep.
And several of the suspects that Catherine has identified on her podcast series were familiar with the dog. I didn't know that. But
Right.
So several people connected to this case are familiar with that dog. So I'm telling you right now, our killer knew about the piano leg, was so mad at her he couldn't stand it. The motive was not sexual, and it was most certainly not sexual. There was some compelling reason to need to clean the mess up. Removing the body was
From the scene of the crime.
right. Removing the body was a tremendous risk to take, and then the dog. And here's the other thing about the dog. I was thinking about this. So when you're when you're dragging Rebekah out of the house, where's the dog going to be?
Yeah,
It's going to follow you out the door.
absolutely.
The killer put the dog back in the house, or made it stay in the house,
Right.
which I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to make of that. So anyway, now
It's like the attention to the detail following the crime is just remarkable, because if you've worked a lot of murder cases,
Right.
and no murderer has, if they didn't know the person or weren't trying to cover themselves,
Right.
why would they pay such close attention to all these details, like the dog and the cleanup and removing the body?
right.
Is that a fair
One-
statement? I mean,
one thing I couldn't figure out was why the person didn't just wrap her up in the sheets and put her in the suitcase. I mean,
Right.
why would you keep?
why try and
sheets?
wash the sheets? Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just it's odd. I mean, this is an odd case. So we have all this now. In this case, we've never had like an official suspect. The police say they have suspects. The only person who's ever been named as a person of interest in the case is Casey McCullough.
And let me say something. The killer was in a hurry.
Right.
The killer had to be somewhere. The killer was trying to get out of Dodge.
Right.
And that's why the cleanup was not fully completed.
Shoddy. Yeah.
That's, you know what I mean? And they took the time to lock the house as well.
Right. So, so now we get to the only person of interest in the case is Casey. I was actually at the sheriff's department one of the times he was brought in and interrogated. I watched him be walked in. I was standing with the family. That whole week, I never ran into him. I'm told.
Why don't you say, though, what he said to you? You did get one statement from him, and he said what?
He said that he.
This is the greatest.
This is the greatest tragedy of my life. He did say that, but that was later. Now, that whole week I met a lot of people out searching for Rebekah. I never ran into him, and I found out later that he wasn't out help searching. Now, to be fair, some family members said that there was some threats made or something like that, and that's entirely possible. I get it. Danielle said, that she didn't really see him after that. He didn't come to the funeral.
Really?
Yeah, that he, wasn't around. Now, here's the thing. Initially, police said that he was cleared in the case. Now, I want to make sure we understand what initially cleared means. Initially cleared means that for what they have now, this person is, free to go. We have no reason, we can't keep you for any reason. We can't charge you with a crime. You don't have any more useful information to give us at this time. Every human being on the face of the earth right now is a suspect because no one's been arrested.
Right.
So anyway, there's been some speculation online. I'm getting a lot of messages like, that Rebekah and Casey weren't even romantically involved. That is absolutely false. It's like Danielle told me they spent every weekend together. They slept in the same bed. Casey told me when I talked to him, the last time I talked to him, he said that they would spend all their time together. They were together constantly. So Casey is, this is the timeline. Casey is with Rebekah at 8 o'clock in the morning. She drops him off. We don't know. I just always have assumed he was at work,
Yes.
and I figured the police have completely confirmed that. I'm sure they have. And then he gets off work that afternoon. 4 of his friends are going to Batesville to watch a movie, do some stuff. And so they ask him if he wants to go. And he says, sure. And so he ends up going with them. He doesn't go home that night. At some point, now Danielle told me she tried to call him a bunch that night. She couldn't get a hold of him. I don't know why. I've never talked to him about that, so I don't know what the deal is on that. I do know that at some point, one of his friends made a statement to the police that he used his phone, called somebody, he's not sure who, and then after that said, Rebekah is missing. So
Yeah.
Casey made that statement to the friend, and then in a second statement from another person who gave a statement to the police who was there that night, they also said that at some point Casey said, she's missing.
Right.
She's a missing person. And Danielle told me that that night she's pretty sure that Casey told her she was missing. So, and in the statements they gave police, the two guy friends were a little bit surprised. And this is back to it. One of them said literally, and the words were, he was head over heels for her.
Right.
And then another statement said that he was really in love with her and all this other stuff. So to say that they weren't romantically involved is absurd. I mean,
Right.
they were. They may not have been boyfriend and girlfriend. In fact, this is the original missing poster that was handed by Rebekah's mother. And on the back of it, it says, she doesn't have a boyfriend, but, she's kind of involved with a guy named Casey McCullough, and the name is back there. So right now, we don't have any suspects. I think when you look at all this, you can create a pretty good picture. I think you should be able to create a suspect list based on this, and all the stuff we've just talked about is completely based in these documents.
Right.
And another thing I'll say about them not being romantically involved, or people who say that, it's just not true. On her death certificate, it lists the same residence that she was almost certainly removed from in Guyan.
Well, and speaking with Dr. Gould as well, he shared with me that weekend she was ending things with Casey, and she was
Right.
going to move on with her life, and they had a great, Dr. Gould and Rebekah had a great talk, and she wanted to actually become an eye doctor.
Right.
And she was making plans to better her life, and he mentioned to me, and of course to you, that she was in the process of ending things
Right.
with Casey and trying to start a new life for herself. So,
And Danielle mentioned the same thing. And listen, I don't know about all that. And here's the thing. Splitting up doesn't make anybody guilty of anything.
absolutely.
It absolutely does not. I'm just saying that I think that in this case, and another thing, as far as the police go, Danielle told me that she wasn't ever really interrogated or interviewed as a real witness. She said she's spoken to the police a few times, but she never really sat down to her knowledge. And so I'm trying to figure out why they wouldn't have interviewed the most important person in Rebekah's life, which was her
Right.
sister. That was the person she was closest to.
So the part that gets me is the uneaten breakfast sandwich was still on her nightstand, and that's a detail that I just play over and over in my head. So I know how I feel her last moments were, but I want you to tell the viewers how you think Rebekah spent her last moments.
Okay.
So just kind of do a recap there.
This is what I think happened. And this is based on these reports, all the reporting I've done all these years. I believe that Rebekah went and dropped her friend off at work that morning at Sonic. She left there, she went to the Possum Trot convenience store, she bought a breakfast biscuit and some other things. She goes back to his house. All of her clothes are packed in her suitcase. The breakfast biscuit is still in the house. I think she probably took a shower and decided to take a quick nap. She was known to sleep in a t-shirt and panties. So she goes and she goes to take a nap. As she's napping, her killer comes in the door. He goes and grabs a piano leg. He walks into that room. The dog knows him, so he's not going to bark at him or her. It could possibly be
Right.
her. I very seriously doubt it's a girl. I think a girl would have hit her more than once. And that I changed on that.
And at one
Yeah.
point, we did think that.
Yeah.
We had rumors that there was a fight at a party the night before, that there
Yeah.
was a lover's quarrel, that two girls came in and jumped Rebekah. But
Yeah.
here's the thing is we know that Rebekah was a scrapper, and Rebekah was not going to not defend herself. So
Right.
we've kind of ruled that out.
Almost completely now.
But at one
And,
point,
and a key detail here is that Dr. Gould gave us the autopsy report.
right,
And it filled in a lot of the
just a
missing
single
stuff.
blow.
Yeah. So the killer comes in a rage-fueled attack. Comes in, crushes her skull with one vicious blow to her head, and then grabs her suitcase, takes her clothes out, puts her body in there, zips it up, wheels it out. It had wheels. Wheels it out to the car. And Danielle said it would have been big enough for her to be moved in.
Right.
The killer puts the suitcase in there, the killer either makes the dog stay in the house or puts the dog back in the house, whatever. And the dog had a pillow on the couch or would be asleep in the bed with Rebekah, either place. That's what Danielle told me. The killer then takes I think he took back trail to where the body was dumped. And then I always wondered, because I'd heard the rumor about the suitcase. I was like, why would you take him out of the suitcase? And Danielle said, she just told me, she said, what if the person knew they left a bloody handprint on it?
Right, absolutely.
So the killer, after they dumped the body, this is one thing I'm not sure about one way or the other. Did they go back to the house and clean up, or did they do it before they left?
Right.
I mean, who knows? I mean, we don't know. And
that we know they just didn't get to finish cleaning.
Right. And this is just another speculation on my part. That piano leg, the White River's not very far from there. I would almost bet you money that piano leg ended up in the White River.
Yeah.
And I know I'm right about that because the police have searched the White River before looking
Right.
for that thing. And it's possible it wasn't the piano leg. It could have been another blunt force object. But
why is it missing?
Right, yeah, why is it missing? So anyway, and I will say this, I've covered a lot of murder cases through the years,
Right.
AK, and one thing about it, people always talk.
Yes.
They always talk, and I guarantee you that our killer has told somebody, probably more than one, and those people need to come forward and tell their story. And even the person who did it.
That's the thing about this case is there's either a lot of chatter that with all these scenarios that are just like, oh,
Right.
please quit talking. And then the ones that we want to come forward who really know that could really be helpful. They're
Right.
either not talking at all or they're just, I've had so many tips that have been dead end after dead
Right.
end. But everyone seems so spooked out. And really, now that I think about it, I'm like, it's just kind of silly.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, I feel silly even about some of my former theories about this
Me
case.
as well.
But here's the thing, though. We have more information now.
Right.
With,
I mean, at one point I thought the letter that we received was
yeah,
real.
yeah.
I mean, and
I mean, in journalism and even like being,
you
detective.
get something, you go on it until
Yeah.
you find out it's not right.
Being a detective and being a journalist are kind of the same thing. So you follow the lead until it's end, and sometimes a lot of them are dead ends.
Yes.
So a lot of them are dead ends. Sometimes there's only one road to get to one place.
And we don't have the information that Israel County Sheriff has, that the Arkansas State Police has.
Right.
We have what you viewers give us, and we go off of that, and we follow that rabbit trail until we decide it's no good or
Right.
something comes of it.
Right.
And we both are kind of firm in what we think now
Yeah.
about this case.
Yeah. I mean, I think that right here.
This is your answer.
Yeah, this is it. This is the template. Okay, this is how you're going to figure this out because you need to start adding all these things up, and what does that add up to? And and I'll even say this: the person who did it, they probably maybe they feel horrible about it. Maybe they should just come forward.
Right.
End all this.
So I think we've covered everything we want to cover.
Yes.
And if anybody has any information, contact the Arkansas State Police, contact myself, contact George Jarrett. We're both on Facebook, and George is a very reachable man, and we'll put our information in on the end of this video. But stay tuned because George and I have decided that we're gonna pursue this. We're gonna pick this back up. He was the first reporter at the time when he was a reporter to write about this case. He covered it. To this day, this case, you have said it haunts you.
Yes.
And it also at the same time made you into a journalist, and myself as well. When I first started working at Area Wide Media, I did a lot of cold cases. In this case, I cannot put it down. I cannot put this case down, and I think there's something to that because this is something we always come back to. We both are busy and have full-time careers, but we always end up coming back to this case, and we've made another commitment that we're going to pursue this, and it's maybe a different route that y'all have never seen before. But we're gonna
and I would encourage anybody who's out there to watch the Dr. Oz show with Dr. Larry Gould and Catherine Townsend,
Yes.
and listen to the Hell and Gone podcast.
Yes.
It's got a lot of information in there, so Read it. Listen, there are tons of stories on the internet I've written, you've written.
Right.
Go out and read all this stuff. It's in my books too. So it's pretty much everywhere.
And if you have questions, message us, and we would love to answer your questions. Or if you know something, of course, come forward.